Morning, guys. It's 6:36 in the morning, West Coast time. It's still the 3rd of November, 2023. We were John C., Roseman, California. For those who follow space news, here's something that's going to be tearing at your guts. I just caught this news blurb when I woke up earlier. It's already been out for a couple of hours, but it's still heartbreaking anyway. We're losing the old guard from, well, the old guard from Mercury's gone. Gemini's dying out. So is Apollo program. The old NASA glamour days of going out and challenging space is dying, fading away. I suppose Jim Lovell's going to be next, and Buzz Aldrin. Maybe Frank Borman if he's not dead yet. I'd still have to get a listing of who's alive yet, because this is important to me. These guys are gods. No, I take that back. Legendary. Screw the gods thing. These guys are legendary. And what kicks my ass at this point over here is seeing that mortality. These guys have lived a long time and gone through a great deal. They've gotten into legendary immortality. They've gotten into the books. Ken Mattingly, according to the article, and I didn't even realize this, he was Capcom, I think, for Apollo 13, or probably in the process of trying to figure out how to get the astronauts to survive their week and a half long trip. When the Apollo 13 launched into space, they have each astronaut has their own duties of taking care of things on the ship. That includes uh, stirring the cryo tanks. This is supposed to help out with fuel and stuff. I never could quite figure out what the hell the cryo tanks were in the first place. But somehow there was an explosion happen, short circuit happened, and blew out their service module. They couldn't see it, but they were losing voltage, power, everything. They had to shut things down and rely entirely on the batteries of the lunar module. Now, they had only lasted for a short time, but they had to stretch out everything. There was even an emergency that they actually had on board the ship where they were losing breathing air, oxygen, because of too much carbon dioxide. So they had to make their own scrubbers. The thing is, with the service module, it also helped out with that, but you had to it didn't have that much power left in the service module after the explosion. There are recorded pictures of how the service module looked after the Apollo capsule ejected from it, and you would see the side of the ship just mangled mess. Ken was one of those astronauts in the training simulators, working feverishly how to minimize power while trying to maximize its usage. And they would tell that over the radio to the guys freezing to death in that capsule. They had one chance to get around the moon. All they had to do was open up a valve and the engine would just fly them around. Frank Borman was in command of that mission. They had a movie about it, Apollo 13. HBO did a series of From the Earth to the Moon. They're excellent pieces of knowledge because they draw upon NASA history. Seeing that, oh God, these guys were braver than anything else I've seen. I had missed seeing Apollo Mercury and Project Gemini. I mean, Mercury was just six guys. There's supposed to have been seven guys, but six guys would go into space in sequential order. Not by last name, but by who gets the lot. Shepard goes first, Grissom goes second, Young goes third. Original seven. One of the astronauts, Deke Slayton, couldn't do it because the doctors worried about his heart, worried about irregular heart rhythm. Well, the heart fibrillates. Atrial fibrillation, actually, they called it. But when the heart's not beating properly, they have a problem with that because they don't know whether or not if an astronaut was going to suffer a heart attack, and there's no way to get the astronaut down from space to treat him. It's just not done. So they kept Deke Slayton out. And he became chief pilot. He became chief astronaut. He would be doing the roster. He would be doing the crew assignments. Which crew member is going to be getting which ship and which mission. Finally, after Skylab had completed its missions, well after Apollo, they had one to do. Trying to make a relationship with the Russian. They were trying to make some kind of connection with them. So they had the Apollo Soyuz. One last Saturn rocket ride. And that was Deke's. He would be the one that shakes hands with the Russian astronauts, do the publicity, and then come on home. But at least he got to fly it. I remember that mission. Growing up as a kid, I was in the middle of Apollo program. I was born well after the Project Mercury and Project Gemini had ended, so now we are ending during that time, and now we had the Apollo program. What was it, July 11th, 1969? I'm still a young kid, not knowing what the hell I'm watching on television. Barely watching this damn thing, barely remember what the hell it was, but it was memorable. I'm just watching television. In an apartment out in North Hollywood. I'm sitting with my mama, I'm sitting with my brother, and they were like, after seeing Neil Armstrong and then Buzz Aldrin get on the moon. And I'm like, oh. No clue. I'm watching it. I don't have no clue what the hell it is. It's not until later, decades later, I started to realize what the hell was going on. And I started remembering it. But I remembered Ma would watch what happened in Vietnam during those days. And she was worried about my brother. She was worried that Dave was going to be old enough for the draft if the war continued on and on and on and on. She was not going to have my brother die in Nam. Me, on the other hand, I'm reading books about space. Ma gave me this big ass huge book, two of them for Christmas, when I was able to read. I mean, big monsters books. You flip the pages and be able to see stuff. And to me, my tiny hands and my tiny body, I'm watching this. I'm looking at this thing. They're the most beautiful things I ever seen. I'm reading, and I'm looking at pictures. I'm like, wow, are they real? Were they real, Ma? It shows things to Ma about the book. When I got older, I started picking up other books about space. Ma got me this one book for Christmas. Walk in Space, it was called. It was about Project Mercury, well before Apollo happened. Mercury was the program that would bring out all the skills the astronauts would learn in order to survive going from the Earth to the Moon and back again. And they would also learn how to dock, but how to land is a different thing altogether. That's why they got simulators, ground side. But whatever they needed up in space, that's what they were learning. And it was. I'm reading this stuff. I'm like, whoa. I read that book again and again and again and again and again. Decades later, when my brother and I were having financial difficulties trying to keep a trailer home together, and we had about 3 families worth of stuff, we had to get a storage room. We had to get a storage place to put a lot of our stuff in. But what got to me, and this happened almost a decade ago, and it still kicks my ass. How to lose a library, about 700 or 800 books. Mostly paperbacks, some of them hard copy, magazines. God, I had a library ready to rock and roll. And boxes and stuff. And I sold them to somebody. And in one of those books, actually, one of those boxes was the book I had regarding Gemini. Kicked my ass for so many years. There was a lot of books I lost. And it hurt. I became a book lover all my life. I loved books. I loved knowledge. I loved reading this stuff. I may not have liked going into college, but man, I loved going to bookstores and reading stuff. I found out through a thrift store in the past couple of years that there was this book out there. A little better condition, but it was the same book I fell in love with a long time ago. I got that in a heartbeat. And I got it stored. I'm not going to let it go again. That was a Christmas present. But it was a book I fell in love with regarding the Project Mercury. See, I didn't have the book concerning about Project Apollo or Project Mercury. Mercury was a Tom Wolfe book regarding the right stuff. He would talk about these guys in a dramatical sense. Project Apollo. They got a lot of books about a Project Apollo at this point over here, but hardly was ever books concerning about Project Mercury. Some of those astronauts in Project Mercury became support and command staff on the Apollo missions. If some of them actually survived, they actually went on the Skylab mission. One of the astronauts, I think, that did either Gemini or the new crop for Apollo, Ken Mattingly. He was a shuttle commander on Space Transport System number 4 and also 51-C mission. I didn't realize it. I didn't realize that Ken Mattingly was the same Ken Mattingly from Apollo. But he flew in the early days of the space shuttle. Now, the space shuttle to me was like an everyday thing. It's like watching the Apollo program on a constant basis. We'd seen the Apollo program all the way up until about, 71, 72? When the last of it, about Apollo 17, was landing on the moon. And I think it was Ken Mattingly was in command of that one, according to the article. I'm going through one of the news sites. It was reported that in the movie Apollo 13, Gary Sinise played him while he was working feverishly in the simulator trying to save the Apollo 13 astronauts trapped. That was killer. That was cool, but Apollo 4, actually Shuttle 4 mission and Shuttle 51. Oh my God. This was, the Space Shuttle came out in 81, but they were talking about it for, in the Apollo days, of having that kind of transportation system. And at one time I actually had hands on a technical manual. I lost that one, unfortunately. I wish I had it. It's not, it would be knowledge worth of what the shuttle system looked like. God. She was gorgeous. A space shuttle? It may have been a winged bird and looked like a damn flying brick, but I know there have been a couple of movies out there that made fun of the space shuttle program. Flying brick, she was not. Gorgeous to look at. That was a space program in my youth to adulthood. Fred Hayes was part of it, and I didn't even realize it. That makes it more special and more poignant. It does. I never had the chance to get out to Edwards to see the shuttle land. I always had to see it on the screen. But we heard the boom. I'm like, yeah, she's coming. And by the time you heard the boom, she's already been passed already. I mean, she's already been on the ground landing, and everyone else is going, yay. I'm like, one of these days I'm going to see you in the flight. The hardest damn thing was to see the Columbia in the flight. Not the Columbia. It wasn't Atlantis either. What was it? Challenger? Oh, Challenger went up. Columbia went up. Discovery. I think we got the Atlantis out here. Yeah, we got the Atlantis. Workhorse. She had the bigger payload. She had a bigger payload than the other ships. So she was able to haul more stuff into space, including help build the International Space Station. I remember seeing the last days of this space shuttle doing its monumental tour across the country. It hurt like hell when NASA didn't have the money anymore in the budget, and they had to call it. They call it cost overruns or too much politics or something like that. We had servicing out here we could have done for it. She was built, parts of her, and assembled out here in Palmdale, Plant 42, Skunk Works area. Rolling her out there back in the mid to late 70s, and you're seeing the cast of the old Enterprise. It was not the Atlantis was rolling out, it was just the Enterprise itself. The tester that they would fly in the desert like crazy to make sure that everything was working. No power, just a glider. They'd put a shell, an aerodynamic shell, at the end of the engine nozzles to make everything else aerodynamic. And they would drop her, actually, they would release her from a specially modified 747. And she'd be flying high and then gliding in. And they're getting all the information necessary. So when the actual mission comes for the other shuttles, then that was it. Enterprise was the tester, and someone else's museum piece. We could have had the Enterprise. We should have had the Enterprise, but we got Atlantis. We should have had the Atlantis out here in the desert regions, but This was closer to the general public. One of these here days, I got to get down to the museum and see it. They've got a museum dedicated to her. She's going to be enclosed, but afterwards she's going to be resting in the open. Damn. Can't get close to touch her either. Miss those days too. Yeah, my memories concerning about space flights. It's part of my adulthood growing up. I remember seeing the launches on television, and it was fantastic. I was seeing the space shuttle program in my lifetime as they went up in space. I wanted to be one of those astronauts. I had a childhood dream of becoming an astronaut out there, floating in space like that. That would have been something. They tried to simulate floating in space by having a buoyancy tank. You put on the astronaut gear, and then you would train in a zero G environment, which is zero buoyancy. It's a water tank, basically. How to do tasks in there, including how to build the International Space Station. I didn't mind staying in that kind of environment for the water. I didn't. But that was something though. I got older, I got fatter. I wasn't even in physical condition, not even mentally trained for that. I'm just one of the guys in the sidelines, just well support this NASA program one way or another. If I have to keep wearing the memorabilia to show people that NASA still exists and they're still working on it. And you're probably going to be asking me, what about the Orion project they got going on? Will they actually be able to land on Mars in my time? I don't know. Maybe. Hope so. 10 or 15 years, maybe. It would be nice to see it. Barely remember the lunar landing, but I probably would remember the Martian landing. But if I happen to get more people back on the moon again in my lifetime, I'll be looking forward to that. Private enterprise is still working out the kinks on their supposed rockets, and so is NASA. I still want to see something happening in my lifetime regarding another manned landing somewhere. Even if it has to be back on the moon again. That'll be cool. I wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind seeing that at all. Here's to you, Ken. Here's to you, pal. And thank you for your service. Your mission is over, and it was a complete success.